Good afternoon. My name is Castellana de Andalucia, and I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Belonging Officer for the Kingdom of Andalusia. I have my office email here, as well as my personal email, as well as where you can find me on Facebook. I am really, really big on open channels of communication, clear communication, questions, all those things are great. So this is my blanket consent. You may contact me through email or Facebook, whichever one is easiest for you. But I highly encourage questions and open communication. Beginning of all my classes, I like to go through some community agreements, and these are just basically things that we all agree to abide by in class. This way we can keep information flowing, we can be respectful, and we can have productive conversations. And that is using I statements, actively listening, respecting confidentiality, and honoring boundaries. I statements are active first person speaking. It focuses on the feelings and belief of the person speaking, and it's more personal and less accusatory or argumentative. There's a big difference in hearing "I don't feel heard" versus "you're not listening to me." So I statements are I think, I feel, I am concerned, I want, I need. Active listening, there are 7 key steps to active listening, but the one I like to focus on is the reflecting and paraphrasing. This is the best way I have found to make sure that I am getting my point across and making sure that I'm understanding someone else's perspective correctly. And that is to repeat back what you think they meant in your own words. And if you can repeat it back, that gives the speaker the opportunity to say, yes, exactly, that's what I meant. Or, okay, I can see where there might be some ambiguity. Let me see if I can word that differently or word that better. Confidentiality is basically what happens in class stays in class. It's perfectly okay, and I encourage you to leave this class and tell your friends. In DEI class, we talked about this, but what respecting confidentiality means is it's not okay to leave this class and tell your friends, in this DEI class, this specific person said this specific thing. And then boundaries, dictionary definition is a line that marks or limits an area or a dividing line. Personal boundaries are the limits or rules we set for ourselves. I always start with my first term in definition is emic versus etic language. Emic language are terms or ideas that come from within a culture or group of people, an insider's perspective, and etic are terms that are used from an outside perspective. When at all possible, I try really hard to use emic terms. If there are terms and words, ideas that are preferred from within a certain group, I will try to use those. Personal autonomy. Autonomy is the capacity to be one's own person and to live one's life according to the reasons and motives that are taken as one's own and not the product of manipulating or distorting external forces. In this way, it is to be independent. It is having control over your own life, over your own personal, your personal health, your privacy and security, your interpersonal and social connections, etc. Consent. I teach an entire class on consent, but for brevity, consent is to give, assent, or approval to. This is a great acronym. Consent, think fries. Consent is freely given. It is reversible. It is informed. It is enthusiastic, and it is specific. This different image, same idea. Consent is clear. It means it is expressed through words or actions that are mutually understandable. It's never implied, and the absence of a no is not a yes. It is coherent. It is willing. Consent is never given under pressure, and it is ongoing. Consent must be granted every time. A great example, funny example, I read about consent being ongoing is a friend comes up and asks me, hey, can I borrow your car this weekend? I say, sure. The next weekend, and I'm like, where'd my car go? They're like, oh, well, you told me I could borrow it. I was like, I told you I could borrow it last weekend. Well, yeah, you said I could borrow it once, so that means I can borrow it any time, right? Wrong. It is ongoing. Consent has to be granted every time. Gatekeeping. This was wonderfully suggested that I add at the end of my last class, so I definitely wanted to add it, and it pertains very acutely to terms and definitions. And gatekeeping is defined as when someone takes it upon themselves to decide who does or does not have access or rights to a community or identity. Essentially, gatekeeping is an ongoing practice that is a hierarchy of power within the community and further excludes others. An example is a person mentions that they love a particular musical artist. A gatekeeper may retort, oh yeah, we'll name 5 of their albums. A more serious implication of gatekeeping would be isolating members within the LGBTQIA plus community. For example, if a cisgendered woman identifies as queer, but she is currently dating a cisgender male, gatekeeping behavior would be she can't be queer if she's with a man. And gatekeeping further marginalizes members of an already marginalized community, leading to a snowball effect of diminished self-worth. Gatekeeping is when someone takes it upon themselves to decide who does or does not have access or rights to a community or identity. This also applies to language. A gatekeeper would be someone who says, I have all the right answers. These are my terms and definitions, and only these definitions are what is valid. Anyone else's definition is invalid. Only my definition is correct. And that's certainly not something I want to do. So for me, it is incredibly important not to gatekeep language, not to gatekeep these terms and definitions, because I don't have all the answers. These terms and definitions that I'm providing today are, based on the research I've done, but I am only one person. I only have access to certain sources. So my answers are not the end all be all of terms and definitions, and that's really important. Ableism. Ableism is a set of beliefs or practices that devalue and discriminate against people with physical, intellectual, or psychiatric disabilities, and often rest on the assumption that disabled people need to be fixed or cured in one form or another. Disability versus impairment. A disabled person is a person with an impairment who experiences disability. Disability is the result of negative interactions that take place between a person with an impairment and their social environment. Impairment is thus part of a negative interaction, but it is not the cause of, nor does it justify disability. An impairment would be an injury or illness or cognitive condition that causes or is likely to cause a loss or difference of psychological or physiological function. In contrast, a disability is the loss or limitation of opportunities to take part in society on an equal level with others due to social and environmental barriers. The only disability in life is a set of ingrained social constructs which normalize the oppression, exclusion, and othering of people with disabilities. ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. of 1990 provides comprehensive civil rights protections to individuals with disabilities in the area of employment, state, local, and government services, public accommodations, transport, and telecommunications. A reasonable accommodation. The ADA requires reasonable accommodations as they relate to three aspects of employment: ensuring equal opportunity in the application process, enabling a qualified individual with a disability to perform the essential functions of a job, and three, making it possible for an employee with a disability to enjoy equal benefits and privileges of employment. What does reasonable accommodation mean in the SCA? Reasonable accommodation could be having golf carts available on site for people with mobility issues. That way they have equal access to all the different areas of the event. A reasonable accommodation would be providing space in a refrigerator or freezer unit for people with medications that have to stay below a certain temperature. That way they can fully participate and benefit from the event, just like everyone else. The medical model versus the social model of disability. The social model of disability says that disability is caused by the way society is organized, rather than by a person's impairment or difference. It looks at ways of removing barriers that restrict life choices for disabled people. When barriers are removed, disabled people can be independent and equal in society with choice and control over their own lives. Disabled people developed the social model of disability because the traditional medical model did not explain their personal experiences of disability or help to develop a more inclusive way of living. In contrast to the social model, the medical model of disability says that disability is caused by the ways. The social model of disability, I apologize, got lost in my own slide here. Social model of disability says that disability is caused by the way society is organized, while the medical model of disability says that people are disabled by their impairments or differences. Under the medical model, these impairments or differences should be fixed or changed by medical and other treatments, even when the impairment or difference does not cause pain or illness. The medical model looks at what is wrong with the person and not what the person needs. It creates low expectation and leads to people losing their independence, choice, and control in their own lives. Image of a person in a wheelchair in front of a set of stairs. The sign says, "The way in, everyone is welcome." The medical model of disability says, "Her impairment is the problem. They should cure her or give her a prosthetic." While the social model of disability says, "The stairs are the problem. They should build a ramp." Neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is the diversity of human brains and minds, the infinite variation of neurocognitive functions within our species. Brains are weird. Each brain is weird in its own way. All brains work differently. The term neurodivergence, or sometimes abbreviated as ND, means having a brain that functions in a way that diverges significantly from the dominant social standards of normal. Neurotypical, often abbreviated as NT, means having a style of neurocognitive functioning that falls within the dominant societal standards of normal. Keep having to move my icons around. Why is it not letting me? There we go. The neurodiversity model is there is no normal brain sitting in a vat somewhere at the Smithsonian or National Institute of Health to which all other brains must be compared. There is no perfect brain that is the standard for all other brains. All of our brains work differently, and that's the basis of the neurodiversity model, is there is no standard brain. An invisible illness. An invisible illness is a physical, mental, or neurological condition that is not visible from the outside, yet can limit or challenge a person's movement, senses, or activities. A chronic illness. Chronic diseases are defined broadly as conditions that last 1 year or more and require ongoing medical attention or limit activities of daily living, or both. A chronic or long-term illness means having to adjust to the demands of the illness and the therapy used to treat the condition. There may be additional stresses, hence chronic illness might change the way you live, see yourself, and relate to others. Hardly an exhaustive list, but some examples of chronic illnesses would be AIDS, allergies, asthma, cancer, diabetes, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, muscular dystrophy, etc. Spoon theory, as a way of looking, or as a way of thinking about chronic illnesses. And this is the intellectual property of Christine Miserandino. I believe I said that somewhat correctly, and is published on her website. And I absolutely love this, www.butyoudon'tlooksick.com. You've probably heard someone say they're having a low spoon day, or that they're out of spoons. Spoon theory is popular among those with invisible illnesses, as it is a perfect way to explain the choices we have every day due to a limited amount of energy, using spoons as a metaphor for a unit of energy. The story goes that Christine Miserandino was sitting in a cafe with her friend, having brunch, talking about what she can and cannot do within a day. And her friend, very confused, asked, "I don't understand." And so Christine looked around and simply grabbed up all the spoons on all the tables she could find. And this was the birth of spoon theory. So she had a bundle of spoons in her hand. And she said, "Okay, this is how much energy you have throughout the day. Once your spoons are gone, that's it. You can't do anything else." And she asked her friend, "Okay, so what do you do in the morning?" And her friend said, "Well, I wake up, I make coffee, I make my breakfast, I take a shower, I get dressed." And Christine said, hold up. That was 5 different things? Okay, so you got out of bed. She takes a spoon away. You made your coffee, takes a spoon away. You took a shower, takes 2 spoons away. You made breakfast, takes a spoon away. And they go throughout her friend's day with Christine slowly taking spoons away. And by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon in this hypothetical day, Christine's friend says, "I'm out of spoons." Christine says, "I know." Her friend says, "But I've still got a lot of stuff to do today." "Too bad, you're out of spoons." And it was Christine's way of conveying to her friend that people with chronic illnesses have to limit or have to manage very carefully their energy throughout the day, because what one person may see as a no energy task, "I made my coffee, that doesn't take any energy," to someone with a chronic illness, sometimes making coffee can take a lot out of you. And this kind of gives a breakdown to what costs how many spoons. Getting out of bed, 1 spoon. Taking a bath, 2 spoons. Making and eating a meal, 3 spoons. Going to work or school, 4 spoons. And if you only have 12 spoons per day, you're already out of school, you're already out of spoons, and you don't have enough energy to go shopping or to socialize or to do housework. Person first language versus identity first language. Person first language puts the person before the diagnosis. The thinking behind this is that a person is more than their diagnosis. So an example of person first language would be a person with autism. Identity first language views a person's diagnosis as an indivisible part of their identity. The thinking behind this is that a diagnosis is not inherently bad, and is principal in the formation of a person's identity. So an example of first person language would be an autistic person. The People First Respectful Language Modernization Act, that was a mouthful, of 2006 was enacted by the Council of the District of Columbia on July 11th, 2006, to require the use of respectful language when referring to people with disabilities in all new and revised district laws, regulations, rules, and publications, and all internet publications. And the idea going back was that a person is more than their diagnosis. And this you will hear person first language used in educational institutions, in medical offices, in therapies, in diagnostic labs, etc. However, the problem with this is it highlights that most people see disabilities as a deficit and/or disease, and is something that we need to find a cure for. In the autistic community, many self-advocates and their allies prefer terminology such as autistic, autistic person, or autistic individual, because we understand autism as an inherent part of an individual's identity, the same way one refers to Muslim, African American, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, Chinese, gifted, athlete, or Jewish. And this is a quote from the Autistic Hoya webpage. I am not here to say that person first or identity first is right, wrong. I am giving you the best information I have on why people use each one. I will say for myself, I use identity first. I am autistic. I have an autistic son. A great example, a great image that I've seen is it is a stick figure holding a suitcase that is labeled autism. And autism is not an external thing. It's not something I can set down and walk away from. It is an integral part of myself and has played a huge part on my lived experiences and how I conduct myself in the world now. But that is me. I choose to use identity first. When in doubt, always, when in doubt, ask. Ask the person or the group of people that you're talking to how they like to be, how they identify, and how they would like you to talk about them, what language they would like you to use. Because just like I like identity first language, there may be others that like person first language. For the sake of teaching, I use identity first language, but that isn't always going to work with everybody. So always ask how someone would like to be, what language they would like you to use. Take a break or take a moment for questions. Someone made the comment that going back that gatekeeping is not necessarily conscious, and that is absolutely true. Using an I statement, using an example, I guess combining the last slide to this example. If I were to say, person first versus identity first. Identity first language is the right way to do it, as opposed to identity first language is the way I speak and the way I prefer. That would be an example of me gatekeeping. If I said that this is the only way or the best way to speak. And we can only, we only see the world and we only interact with the world from our own lived experiences, from our own past, the way we were raised, the institutions we attended or participated in. So it's absolutely correct. A lot of times gatekeeping is completely unconscious. Thank you for making that comment. Do I have any other questions or comments at this time before I keep going? Okay. Oh, yes. Tegan.
To touch on the shift of the terminology that we covered, being in the medical field for 10 years, I have witnessed a shift from person-identified care to identified person care to person-centered care. When person-centered care model came out, the model of the briefcase was used. And when someone opened that briefcase, each part of the briefcase was a part of themselves. Enrichment, financial, medical, and services. And then it turned into this person-first care, and the evolution and the breaking of those gates have been amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments before I move on? All right.
Sorry,
yes.
This is Nessa.
Yes.
Another part of gatekeeping is, for example, if a deaf person asks, what did they say? Or a blind person says, what do you see? And you say, and the hearing or the sighted person says something as simple as, I'll tell you later. It's not, it's gatekeeping, and it's not making that person as important as everybody else. And so that's the reason I say that sometimes it's unconscious. It's like we're in the middle of, we're having a really good time, and it's like, oh, I'll tell you in a minute. Simple gatekeeping and excluding people, or a person in a wheelchair. It's like, can you push me over here? It's like, yeah, hang on. Making them secondary. So that's the reason I made the comment that sometimes gatekeeping is unconscious. It's we don't think about it as hearing, sighted, able-bodied, whatever it is. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
I appreciate it greatly. I appreciate you suggesting I add gatekeeping to this class. I appreciate you adding that a lot of times it's unconscious that we do it. So thank you. Excuse me. So moving on. Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. A trigger. A trigger is a reminder of a past trauma. This reminder can cause a person to feel overwhelming sadness, anxiety, or panic. It may also cause someone to have a flashback. A flashback is a vivid, often negative memory that appears without warning. It can cause someone to lose track of their surroundings and relive a traumatic event. Personal anecdote. I had not had a true flashback in a very long time. And having a flashback where the world around me disappeared and I relived a traumatic event while sitting in a Starbucks coffee shop is an incredibly scary thing. Triggers, flashbacks, they are explosive reactions, and the fallout from them is catastrophic, akin to the traumatic event itself. Not a trigger. Not a trigger. It is normal to feel upset, anxious, or extremely uncomfortable when we encounter difficult content. Having these strong reactions is normal, and learning to regulate them is a part of healthy emotional development. A trigger. Trauma triggers are different. They often include loss of a person's sense of time, space, and/or self. Emotion is amplified or completely muffled, or sometimes seemingly unrelated to a situation. Triggers are like a trap door in the brain. Excuse me. Categorization. The process by which objects, events, people, or experiences are grouped into classes on the basis of A, characteristics shared by members of the same class, and B, features distinguishing the members of one class from those of another. Categorization is a natural brain function. We look at the world around us and we're like, these are similar things, these are similar things, these things are different from these things. It's a way we organize the world around us, which is not inherently bad nor inherently good. Binary, relating to or composed of or involving two things. This image to the left is called the genderbread person, as opposed to a gingerbread person. And I think that's very witty. It's a great mnemonic device. But there are 4 sections. There is the brain, the heart, the genitals, and the entire body. So talking the purple line, sex. And these are according to the APA guidelines. Sex refers to a person's biological status and is typically categorized as male, female, or intersexed. There are a number of indicators of biological sex, including sex chromosomes, gonads, internal reproductive organs, and external genitalia. I believe the last thing I read was there are 10 markers of biological sex, and 2% of the population have it where all 10 biological markers point to a single sex. Most of us have a variation of biological markers pointing to specific sexes, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. Gender. Gender refers to the attitudes, feelings, and behaviors that a given culture associates with a person's biological sex. And the reason I have culture underlined and bolded there is because how we think of attitudes, feelings, and behaviors of a given gender vary drastically cross-culturally and throughout time. So things that we associate In 2023 in Oklahoma, that's where I'm currently located, 2023 Oklahoma, things that we associate as masculine or feminine in nature may or may not have been seen as masculine or feminine 50 years ago, or may not be seen as inherently masculine or feminine in a different state or a different country. So all these associations, we have to look at them cross-culturally and throughout history. I tend to go on small tirades. I apologize. I will get myself back on track. Gender is behavior that is compatible with, behavior that is compatible with cultural expectations is referred to as gender normative, and behaviors that are viewed as incompatible with these expectations can constitute gender nonconformity. And those expectations being those cultural associations. So whenever and wherever you are at the time, those are the associations that are used when we talk about gender normative or gender nonconformity. Identity, an individual sense of self. Is this even a complete sentence? Identity is self-defined by a set of physical, psychological, or interpersonal characteristics that is not wholly shared with any other person, and B, a range of affiliations and social roles. Note to self, go back and make that a complete sentence. Gender identity. Gender identity is a person's deeply felt inherent sense of self with regards to gender. This may or may not correspond to a person's sex assigned at birth or to a person's primary or secondary sex characteristics. And since gender identity is internal, a person's gender identity is not necessarily visible to others. Gender expression. An individual's presentation, including physical appearance, clothing choice, and accessories, and behavior that communicates aspects of gender or gender role. Gender expression may or may not conform to a person's gender identity. I am non-binary gender fluid. My current gender expression is female. That's that last sentence. A gender expression may or may not conform to a person's gender identity. Sexual orientation. This refers to the gender of those to whom one is sexually, or I should say, or romantically attracted. People, I shouldn't say people. I have seen and read people conflating sex, gender identity, sexuality, and gender presentation all in one thing. And that's why I feel it's important to break them down and kind of give the dividing lines to which one between them. This is an example. These are just 3 diagrams that I have found that put gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, etc. on a basically a binary line where you have male and female on either end, and your gender is, either moving towards female and away from male, or towards male and away from female. This is a great, my words have started to fail me. A great comic strip to counter those line graphs from the previous slide. And it is, I see a lot of people use spectrum graphs like these to describe non-binary gender. I think they had me mixed up for a while. The implication here seems to be if you don't feel female, it is because you feel more male, or vice versa. But I don't. If I fit anywhere on a graph line like this, I think it's down here. And they are pointing to somewhere completely off the line. Maybe it is better to think of gender as a galaxy. Most people tend to orbit a gravitational center, but not everyone does. And orbits can change, centers can change, and there's no reason to assume that there are only two centers. So maybe it should look more like this, or possibly even more like this. Inclusive language. And I taught an entire class on this first thing this morning. Inclusive language acknowledges diversity, conveys respect to all people, is sensitive to differences, and promotes equal opportunity. Another thing that inclusive language is and does that I don't have here is it celebrates individuals. I think a lot of attention is placed on acknowledging and accepting. And while those are vital, we can acknowledge and accept things, but still turn our nose up to them or still other them. But inclusive language not only acknowledges and accepts, it celebrates. It celebrates differences, it celebrates similarities, it celebrates individuals. Self-identification. The act of understanding and describing your identity using terms that feel right for you. No one gets to tell you what terms feel right to you. And this is another aspect of gatekeeping. I do not have the right to tell anyone that they are or are not this, that these are the terms that apply to them. The only person who gets to decide what terms are right for them is that person. And that is self-identification in a nutshell. And a whole lot of this beautiful game we play, a whole lot of the SCA centers on self-identification. And it is crucial for chatelaines and hospitallers to instill self-identification not only in us, but in our newcomers. I think too often we have seen a muscular, strapping, male-presenting individual, and we think, oh, let's get you in armor. Or we see a demure, quiet, female-presenting individual, and we say, oh, would you like to try needle art? Maybe the first individual wants to learn how to knit. Maybe the second individual wants to learn how to fight. As chatelaines and hospitallers, it's imperative that we allow them the opportunity to tell us what they want to do, as opposed to telling them what they should do. I just stated what was in my next slide. The importance of self-identification is it helps individuals understand their strengths and weaknesses and provides a foundation for personal growth and development. Self-identification also plays a significant role in how individuals perceive themselves in society. Thank you.